After my husband died, I lost everything. Our home, our car, his 70-year-old company. Working as a waitress, I saw my new coworker, a young black girl, wearing a necklace. I froze. "Where did you get that?" I asked. When she answered, my knees gave out and I burst into tears. "I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far my story has reached. My name is Lucille, and 6 months ago, I was sleeping in silk sheets worth more than most people's monthly salary. Today, I'm standing in a greasy diner uniform that smells like fryer oil, learning how to balance plates on my 68-year-old arms. The irony isn't lost on me. When Lionel died last October, I thought the worst part would be losing my husband of 43 years. I was wrong. The worst part was discovering that everything I believed about our life together was a carefully constructed lie. "Lucille, table 4 needs their check," Sandy, the shift manager, called out. She's younger than my late daughter would have been, but she talks to me like I'm a child learning to walk. I suppose in this world I am. I grabbed the receipt book, my arthritic fingers fumbling with the carbon paper. 6 months of this job, and I still haven't gotten used to the physical demands. My back aches constantly, my feet are permanently swollen, and my hands shake from exhaustion by the end of each shift. But I need this job. When the lawyers finished picking through Lionel's estate, when the creditors took the house, the cars, even my jewelry, this $20 an hour position at Mel's Diner was all that stood between me and complete destitution. The customers at table 4 barely looked up when I brought their check. A young couple, probably in their 30s, discussing their weekend plans to visit wine country, the kind of casual luxury I used to take for granted. The man left a $3 tip on a $42 bill, and I smiled gratefully because I couldn't afford to do otherwise. As I cleared their plates, I caught my reflection in the window. My gray hair, once styled weekly at the most exclusive salon in the city, now hung limp around my shoulders. The fine lines around my eyes had deepened into permanent creases. I looked like what I was, a tired old woman who had fallen from grace. "We're getting a new girl today," Sandy announced during the afternoon lull. "Maya. She's young, so be patient with her." I nodded, remembering my own first day. How I'd dropped a full tray of drinks because my hands weren't used to the weight. How the other waitresses had snickered behind my back, calling me the rich lady who lost it all. They weren't wrong, but it still stung. Maya arrived during the dinner rush, and I noticed her immediately. She couldn't have been older than 22, with beautiful dark skin and bright eyes that reminded me of someone I couldn't quite place. She moved with natural grace, the kind that can't be taught in finishing school. "Lucille, show Maya how to work the register," Sandy instructed before disappearing into the kitchen. As I walked Maya through the basics, I found myself drawn to her gentle demeanor. She listened carefully, asked thoughtful questions, and didn't seem fazed by the chaos around us. When a particularly difficult customer snapped at her for forgetting his extra pickles, she handled it with more poise than I'd managed in months. "You're a natural at this," I told her during our break. Maya smiled, a genuine warmth in her expression. "My grandmother always said customer service is about treating people like family, even when they don't deserve it." "Your grandmother sounds wise." "She was. She raised me after my parents died, taught me everything about strength and dignity." Maya's voice carried a note of sadness. "She passed last year. I felt a familiar pang of grief. Losing the person who shaped you leaves a void that never quite fills." "I'm sorry for your loss." "Thank you." She left me this. Maya touched something at her throat, and that's when I saw it. The world stopped. Hanging from a delicate gold chain around Maya's neck was a pendant I hadn't seen in over 20 years. A small emerald surrounded by tiny diamonds, set in an intricate vintage mounting that I knew better than my own reflection. My hands began to tremble. The coffee cup I was holding slipped from my fingers, shattering on the break room floor. "Are you okay?" Maya jumped up, grabbing paper towels to clean the spill. But I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. I stared at that necklace, my mind racing through memories I'd buried so deep I'd almost convinced myself they weren't real. "Where did you get that necklace?" The words came out as barely a whisper. Maya looked down at the pendant, touching it gently. "This? It was my grandmother's. She said it was the only thing of value she ever owned." "Why do you ask?" I couldn't answer, because the truth was too impossible, too devastating to speak aloud. That necklace had belonged to Lionel's first wife, the woman who died in childbirth 25 years ago. The woman whose existence Lionel had hidden from me for our entire marriage. The woman who had given birth to the daughter I never knew existed. My knees gave out, and I sank into the plastic chair, my vision blurring with tears I couldn't explain to Maya. How could I tell this sweet girl that the necklace around her neck was proof of a secret that would shatter everything she believed about her own identity? "Mrs. Lucille? Should I call someone?" Maya's voice seemed to come from very far away. I forced myself to look up at her face, really look at her, and for the first time I saw what I should have noticed immediately: the shape of her eyes, the curve of her smile, the way she tilted her head when she was thinking. She had Lionel's features, softened by her mother's beauty. "No," I managed to say, my voice cracking. "I'm fine. Just tired." But I wasn't fine. As Maya helped me clean up the broken coffee cup, as we finished our shift in relative silence, as I drove home to my tiny apartment, one thought echoed in my mind. This girl wasn't just wearing my husband's first wife's necklace. She was their granddaughter. And she had no idea that the old woman training her at a diner was the stepmother she never knew she had. The secret Lionel had taken to his grave was working the evening shift at Mel's diner, and she was calling me Mrs. Lucille. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that necklace glinting under the harsh fluorescent lights of the diner. Every time I tried to rationalize what I'd seen, my mind kept circling back to the same impossible conclusion. Maya was family. Lionel's family. The family he'd hidden from me for over 4 decades. By morning, I'd made a decision. I needed to know the truth, even if it destroyed what little peace I'd managed to find in my new life. The next evening at work, I watched Maya more carefully. The way she moved reminded me of photos I'd seen of Lionel as a young man. The confidence in her stride, the quick way she picked up new tasks, even the way she laughed with her whole body. It was like seeing my late husband's ghost in female form. "Maya," I said during a quiet moment between the dinner and late-night rushes, "tell me more about your grandmother. What was her name?" Maya's face softened the way it always did when she talked about the woman who raised her. Rose Williams. She was the strongest person I ever knew. Rose Williams. The name didn't ring any bells, but that didn't mean anything. Lionel had been secretive about so many things. Was she originally from around here? No. She moved here from back east when I was little. She always said she wanted a fresh start somewhere warm. Maya paused, studying my face. "Why are you so interested? You've been asking a lot of questions about my family." I felt heat rise to my cheeks. "I'm sorry. I don't mean to pry. It's just, you remind me of someone I used to know." It wasn't entirely a lie. Over the next few days, I found myself creating opportunities to learn more about Maya's background. During breaks, I'd steer conversations toward her childhood, her grandmother's stories, anything that might give me clues about her true identity. What I learned broke my heart in ways I didn't know were possible. Maya had grown up believing she was an orphan. Her parents had allegedly died in a car accident when she was a baby, and Rose Williams had adopted her through a private arrangement. There were no official records, no birth certificate listing biological parents, no family history beyond what Rose had chosen to share. "Grandma Rose always said my parents were good people who would have loved me very much," Maya told me one evening as we restocked the condiment dispensers. "She said my mother was beautiful and kind, and my father was smart and successful. She never told me their names, said it would only make the loss harder." My hands stilled on the ketchup bottles. Smart and successful. That sounded like how someone might describe Lionel to a child who couldn't understand the complicated truth. Did she ever mention where they lived, what they did for work? Maya shook her head. She said the past was meant to stay buried, that what mattered was building a good life moving forward. She touched the necklace absently. This was the only thing she kept from before. She said it belonged to my mother, and someday when I was older, it might help me understand where I came from. I had to excuse myself to the bathroom before Maya could see the tears forming in my eyes. That weekend, I did something I hadn't done since Lionel's funeral. I went through his personal papers. Most of his documents had been seized by creditors or lawyers, but I'd managed to keep a few boxes of what they deemed personal effects with no monetary value. Photo albums, old letters, his college yearbooks, things that had meant something to him, but nothing to the people picking apart his estate. I spread everything across my small kitchen table and began searching for any mention of Rose Williams or clues about Lionel's first marriage. I found it buried in a folder of old tax documents. A receipt from 1999 for a payment to R. Williams Care Services in the amount of $15,000. It was filed under charitable contributions, but something about it felt different from his other donations. My hands shook as I studied the paper. The timing was significant. 1999 was the year Maya would have been born, based on her current age. I kept digging and found more receipts. Monthly payments to R. Williams Care Services, each for varying amounts, spanning over 2 decades. The last payment was dated just 6 months before Lionel's death. He'd been supporting Rose Williams for over 20 years, and by extension, he'd been supporting Maya. The realization hit me like a physical blow. While I'd been living in our mansion, driving luxury cars, and spending money on art and jewelry and charity galas, Lionel had been quietly sending thousands of dollars to support the granddaughter I never knew existed. But why the secrecy? Why had he never told me about his first wife's family? Why had he let me believe we were childless when somewhere across the country, his granddaughter was growing up thinking she was an orphan? I found one more piece of evidence that made everything clear. Hidden in the back of his desk drawer, wrapped in tissue paper, was a photograph. It showed a young woman with Maya's exact features, holding a baby. On the back, in Lionel's handwriting, were the words, Sarah and Maya, 2 years old. Sarah, not Rose. The grandmother Maya had known as Rose Williams was actually named Sarah. I stared at that photograph until my eyes burned. This was Maya's mother, Lionel's daughter, the child from his first marriage that he'd somehow lost track of until it was too late. And this baby in the photo was Maya, being raised by a woman who'd changed her name and moved across the country to give them both a fresh start. My mind raced with questions. How had Sarah ended up with Rose? Why had Lionel been sending money but never made contact? What had happened to drive such a wedge between father and daughter that she'd rather fake her own death than reconcile? I was so absorbed in studying the photograph that I almost missed the note tucked behind it. A single sheet of paper with shaky handwriting that I didn't recognize. Mr. Lionel, Sarah passed last month. Maya doesn't know about you, and I think it's better that way. She's a good girl who deserves to make her own choices about family. I've told her I'm her grandmother and that her parents died young. If you want to honor Sarah's memory, let this be the end of it. Some secrets are meant to stay buried. R.W. The note was dated 3 years ago. Rose Williams had been protecting Maya from a truth she thought would hurt her, and Lionel had respected that wish, continuing to send money anonymously until his death, but never trying to make contact. Now here I was, face to face with the granddaughter my husband had loved from a distance, and she had no idea who I was or who she really was. As I sat in my tiny kitchen, surrounded by the evidence of Lionel's hidden family, I realized that the necklace around Maya's neck wasn't just a family heirloom. It was a message, a way for her real identity to find its way back to her, even if the adults in her life had tried to bury it. The question was, what was I going to do with this knowledge? Maya deserved to know the truth about her heritage, but she also deserved to keep the peace and security that Rose Williams had died protecting. Looking at that photograph of Sarah holding baby Maya, I made a decision that would change both our lives forever. Maya was going to learn who she really was. But first, I needed to understand exactly what kind of man Lionel had been, and why his own daughter had chosen to disappear rather than be part of his world. For 3 weeks, I carried the weight of what I'd discovered. Every shift at the diner became an exercise in restraint. I watched Maya laugh with customers, help struggling coworkers, and talk about her dreams of going back to school, all while wearing the necklace that connected her to a grandfather who'd loved her from the shadows. The hardest part was seeing how genuinely kind she was. Maya had inherited none of Lionel's calculating nature, or his ability to compartmentalize his emotions. She was everything I'd hoped our children might have been, if we'd ever had any. Or so I'd thought, until I learned that we had. The breaking point came on a Tuesday evening during the dinner rush. Maya was training a new waitress, patiently explaining how to balance multiple orders while keeping customers happy. I watched her natural leadership abilities emerge, the same commanding presence Lionel had possessed, but tempered with genuine warmth. "She's something special, isn't she?" Sandy commented, following my gaze. "Smart as a whip and twice as hardworking. I've been thinking about recommending her for the assistant manager position." I nodded absently, then froze. "Assistant manager? How long has she been here?" "Just over a month now." "Why?" "A month." Maya had started working here just weeks after I did. Was that coincidence? Or had someone planned for our paths to cross? That night, I made another decision that would change everything. After our shift ended, as Maya gathered her purse from the employee locker room, I approached her. "Maya, could I talk to you for a minute? It's important." She looked up, surprised by the serious tone in my voice. "Of course, Mrs. Lucille. Is everything okay?" We sat in the empty break room, the fluorescent lights humming overhead. Maya waited patiently while I struggled to find the right words. How do you tell someone their entire life story is built on well-intentioned lies? "That necklace you wear," I began carefully. "You said it was your grandmother's, that it belonged to your mother." Maya's hand moved instinctively to her throat. "Yes. Why?" "You've asked about it before. I need you to tell me everything your grandmother told you about where it came from. Everything, even if it seems unimportant." Maya's brow furrowed with concern. "Mrs. Lucille, you're scaring me. What's this about?" I took a deep breath. "Please, trust me. It's important." Maya studied my face for a long moment, then slowly began to speak. "Grandma Rose said it was the only thing of my mother's that she was able to save after the accident. She told me my mother was wearing it when she died, and that someday, when I was old enough to understand, it might help me learn about my family's history." "Did she ever tell you your mother's real name?" "She said it was Sarah. Sarah Williams, same as her own last name. She said they were related. That's why she was able to adopt me." Maya paused. But sometimes, when she was really sick near the end, she would say things that didn't make sense. She would talk about how sorry she was for keeping secrets, how she hoped she'd made the right choice. My heart was pounding so hard I was sure Maya could hear it. "What kind of secrets?" "I don't know." When I asked her about it later, she would just say that sometimes the truth hurts more than it helps. Maya's voice grew softer. She made me promise that if anything ever happened to her, I would try to find out where I really came from. She said this necklace was the key. I felt tears building behind my eyes. Rose Williams had known this day would come. She'd prepared Maya for it, even while trying to protect her. "Maya," I said quietly, "I need to show you something." I reached into my purse and pulled out the photograph I'd found in Lionel's desk. The one showing a young woman who looked exactly like Maya, holding a baby. With shaking hands, I placed it on the table between us. Maya stared at the photo, her face going pale. "Who is this?" "Look at the back." She turned it over and read Lionel's handwriting aloud. "Sarah and Maya, 2 years old." Her voice was barely a whisper. "This is me?" I nodded. "The woman holding you is your mother. Her real name was Sarah, but her last name wasn't Williams." Maya's hands were trembling now. "How do you have this? Who took this picture?" This was the moment I'd been dreading. My husband took it. My late husband, Lionel. The silence stretched between us like a chasm. Maya stared at me, then at the photograph, then back at me. I watched as understanding slowly dawned in her eyes. "Your husband," she repeated slowly. Your husband knew my mother? Sarah was his daughter, from his first marriage, before he met me. The words felt like stones in my throat. Maya, you're not an orphan. You're my step-granddaughter. The color drained completely from Maya's face. She stood up so quickly her chair fell backward, clattering against the floor. That's impossible. Her voice was shaking. Grandma Rose would have told me. She wouldn't have lied about something like that. She was protecting you. I pulled out the note Rose had written to Lionel. Read this. Maya took the paper with unsteady hands. As she read Rose Williams' final message to the grandfather she'd never known, I watched her world reshape itself around this new reality. He knew about me, she whispered. All this time, he knew I existed, and he never. He sent money, every month for over 20 years. He was supporting you through Rose, but he respected her wishes about staying away. Maya sank back into her chair, the photograph clutched in her hands. I don't understand. Why would my own grandfather abandon me? Why would he let me grow up thinking I had no family? This was the part I dreaded most, because I didn't have good answers. I think there was something that happened between your mother and Lionel, something that made her choose to disappear rather than be part of his world. What kind of something? Maya's voice was sharp now, anger replacing shock. I don't know yet, but I think your grandmother Rose knew. And I think that's why she changed her name and moved you both so far away. Maya stared at the necklace in the photograph, comparing it to the one around her neck. This necklace? It belonged to my real grandmother? Lionel's first wife? Yes, your mother's mother. And you never knew about any of this? In 40 years of marriage, he never told you he had a daughter? The pain in her voice cut right through me. No, I found out the same day I met you, when I saw that necklace. I've been investigating ever since, trying to understand. Maya stood up again, pacing the small break room like a caged animal. So my entire life has been a lie. My grandmother wasn't my grandmother. My parents didn't die in an accident. And somewhere out there, I had a grandfather who knew I existed but chose to stay away. Maya, I don't think he chose to stay away. I think he was respecting Rose's wishes because he thought it was what was best for you. She whirled around to face me. What was best for me? What was best for me was knowing the truth. What was best for me was having a family. The anguish in her voice broke something inside me. You did have a family. Rose loved you. She raised you. She protected you. From what? Maya demanded. What was she protecting me from that was worse than growing up thinking I was completely alone in the world. I looked at this beautiful, strong young woman, and I realized I didn't know the answer to that question, but I was going to find out. I'm going to help you learn the truth, I said quietly. About your mother, about what happened between her and Lionel, about why Rose felt she had to hide you. You deserve to know your real story. Maya wiped tears from her eyes with the back of her hand. Why? Why would you help me? I'm nothing to you. The question pierced my heart. You're not nothing to me. You're family. You're the only family I have left. For a moment, Maya's anger softened. Then it hardened again. Family, she repeated bitterly. Like your husband was family to my mother? Like he was family to me all those years when he knew I existed, but never bothered to reach out? I didn't have an answer for that, because she was right. Whatever Lionel's reasons, whatever good intentions he might have had, the result was the same. Maya had grown up alone, believing she had no one, while her grandfather lived in luxury just a few states away. Maya picked up her purse, her movements sharp and angry. I need time to think about this. I need to process what you've told me. Maya, wait. No. She turned back to me, her eyes blazing. You've had weeks to figure out how to tell me this. I deserve some time to figure out how to feel about it. She walked toward the door, then stopped. Without turning around, she said, That necklace. Do you know what happened to my real grandmother? The one it belonged to? I closed my eyes. She died in childbirth, when your mother was born. Maya's shoulders sagged. So she never got to know her daughter either. No. And my mother never got to know her own mother. No. Maya finally turned to look at me, and the pain in her eyes was devastating. What is it with this family? Why does everyone abandon everyone else? Before I could answer, she was gone, leaving me alone in the break room with the scattered pieces of 2 broken lives and the terrible knowledge that I was about to uncover truths that might destroy what little peace either of us had left. Maya didn't come to work the next day, or the day after that. Sandy asked if I knew where she was, and I had to lie, saying she'd mentioned feeling under the weather. The truth was, I had no idea if she was planning to come back at all. I couldn't blame her. I'd turned her world upside down with information I'd had weeks to process, while expecting her to absorb it all in one devastating conversation. If our roles had been reversed, I might have run too. But on the 3rd day, she appeared during the morning shift, moving through her tables with mechanical precision. She was polite to customers, efficient with orders, and completely cold toward me. When our paths crossed, she looked right through me as if I didn't exist. It was worse than anger. It was indifference. During our break, I tried to approach her. "Maya, can we talk?" "There's nothing to talk about," she said without looking up from her phone. "You told me what you thought I needed to know. Now we both have to live with it. That's not fair. There's still so much we don't understand. And whose fault is that?" She finally looked at me and her eyes were empty. "Your husband had 40 years to explain himself. He chose not to. That tells me everything I need to know about what kind of man he was." The dismissal in her voice stung, partly because I was beginning to suspect she might be right. That evening, after Maya had left without saying goodbye, I sat in my car in the diner parking lot and called the only person who might have answers, Lionel's business partner, Harold Pemberton. They'd known each other since college, had built the company together. If anyone knew about Lionel's first marriage and what had driven Sarah away, it would be Harold. Harold had been one of the few people to attend Lionel's funeral who'd treated me with genuine kindness rather than pity or curiosity. When the lawyers had finished dismantling our life, he'd even offered me a small loan to help with the transition. I'd been too proud to accept it then, but now I needed his help in a different way. "Lucille?" Harold's voice was warm but surprised when he answered. "How are you holding up?" "I'm managing. Harold, I need to ask you about something. About Lionel's first wife." The silence stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. Finally, Harold cleared his throat. "Lucille, why are you asking about that? It was so long ago. I've learned some things. About their daughter. About what happened after she died." "Their daughter didn't die, Harold. She grew up and had a child of her own. A granddaughter that Lionel knew about but never told me about." Another long pause. "Jesus, Lucille, how did you find out?" "The granddaughter works with me, at the diner." I heard how impossible that sounded, but I pressed on. "Harold, I need to know what happened between Lionel and Sarah. Why did she disappear? Why did he let her?" Harold sighed heavily. "This isn't a conversation for the phone. Can you meet me tomorrow? There are things you need to see." We arranged to meet at a coffee shop downtown, far from the diner and the memories it held. I spent the rest of the night alternating between dread and desperate hope. Maybe Harold would have answers that would make Lionel's choices understandable. Maybe there was a good reason for the decades of silence. When I arrived at the coffee shop the next morning, Harold was already there, looking older than I'd ever seen him. A manila envelope sat on the table in front of him, and his hands were clasped tightly around his coffee cup. "Lucille," he said as I sat down, "before I show you what's in here, I want you to understand something. Lionel made me promise never to tell you about this. He said it would only hurt you, and it wouldn't change anything that had already happened." My stomach twisted. What wouldn't change? Harold opened the envelope and pulled out a stack of documents. Bank statements, legal papers, and what looked like private investigator reports. Lionel didn't just send money to Rose Williams because he was being generous. He was paying her to keep quiet. The words hit me like a physical blow. Quiet about what? About what he did to Sarah. Harold spread the documents across the table, and I saw transaction after transaction. Payments to private investigators, lawyers, security firms. All dated from the late 1970s and early 80s. Lionel's first wife, Margaret, died in childbirth when Sarah was born. Lionel was devastated, but he loved that little girl more than life itself. For the first few years, anyway, I stared at the papers, trying to process what I was seeing. What do you mean, the first few years? Sarah was a difficult child, rebellious, strong-willed. She reminded Lionel too much of Margaret, and sometimes that was painful for him. But the real problem started when she became a teenager. Harold pulled out a photograph of a young woman who looked exactly like Maya, but with an expression of defiance and pain that made my heart ache. Sarah started asking questions about her mother. She wanted to know why Margaret had died, whether it could have been prevented. She'd found some of Margaret's medical records and discovered that there had been complications during the pregnancy that the doctors had warned about. I felt a chill run down my spine. What kind of complications? The kind that might have been avoided if Lionel had agreed to certain medical interventions that Margaret wanted, but he refused to authorize. The implication hung in the air between us like a toxic cloud. You're saying Lionel was responsible for his first wife's death? Not directly, but Sarah believed he'd prioritized his own wishes over her mother's safety. And when she confronted him about it, when she was 18 and legally able to access all the medical records, Harold pulled out another document. This one was a restraining order, filed by Sarah against her own father. She tried to expose him. She went to lawyers, tried to file a malpractice suit, contacted medical boards. She was young and angry and determined to get justice for her mother. I stared at the restraining order, dated just over 25 years ago. What happened? Lionel had connections, money, influence. He made sure Sarah's accusations never gained traction. But more than that, Harold's voice dropped to a whisper. He had her declared mentally unstable, committed her to a private psychiatric facility. The world tilted around me. He had his own daughter institutionalized for 6 months. The official story was that she'd had a breakdown after learning about her mother's death. But the real reason was to keep her quiet and discredit anything she might say about him in the future. Harold pulled out the last document in the stack. A letter written in shaky handwriting on psychiatric facility letterhead. Sarah wrote this while she was inside. She managed to get it to Rose Williams, who had been Margaret's best friend and had stayed in touch with Sarah over the years. With trembling hands, I picked up the letter and began to read. Dear Rose, by the time you get this, I'll be gone. Dad's lawyers say I can't leave until the doctors declare me stable. But I know that will never happen as long as I keep telling the truth about what he did to my mother. So I'm going to lie. I'm going to tell them I was wrong, that I was confused by grief, that I don't blame Dad for anything. And then, when they let me out, I'm going to disappear. I know Dad will come looking for me. He can't risk me telling people what I know, but I have a plan. There's a man I've been seeing, someone Dad doesn't know about. His name is Marcus. And he loves me even though he knows I'm broken. We're going to leave together, start fresh somewhere Dad will never find us. I'm pregnant, Rose. I know it's not the best timing, but maybe this baby will be the family I've always wanted. The family Dad never let me have. If something happens to me, if Dad finds us, promise me you'll take care of my child. Don't let Dad destroy another generation. The necklace Mom left me is hidden in your jewelry box. Someday, give it to my daughter so she'll know she came from love, even if she can't know the whole truth. I love you, Sarah. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the letter. Maya's father, Marcus, died in a car accident when Maya was 3. Sarah raised her alone for a few years, but she was always looking over her shoulder, always afraid Lionel would find them. Did he? Find them? Harold nodded grimly. When Maya was 5, Sarah knew he was getting close, so she did the only thing she could think of. She faked her own death and gave Maya to Rose, who legally adopted her and changed both their names. The final piece of the puzzle clicked into place. So when Lionel found Rose, he found a grandmother caring for an orphaned child whose mother had died tragically. Rose never told him that Sarah was alive, just that she'd died and left behind a daughter who needed support. I felt sick. And he believed it? Why wouldn't he? As far as he knew, Sarah had disappeared years earlier. He'd been paying private investigators to look for her, but they'd never found any trace. When Rose contacted him claiming to have Sarah's daughter, it probably felt like a miracle. But he never tried to meet Maya, never tried to have a relationship with her. Harold's expression was grim, because Rose made it clear that if he ever tried to contact Maya directly, she would tell the girl everything. About what Lionel had done to Sarah, about the institutionalization, about why her mother had been forced to disappear. The weight of it all crashed down on me. Lionel hadn't been a distant but loving grandfather. He'd been a man paying hush money to keep his crimes hidden, even from his own granddaughter. Where is Sarah now? I asked, though I dreaded the answer. Dead. For real this time. About 5 years ago. Cancer. Harold gathered the documents back into the envelope. Rose never told Maya the truth about any of this. She kept Sarah's secret right up until the end. I sat in that coffee shop, surrounded by the evidence of my late husband's true nature, and realized that Maya's anger was completely justified. She hadn't just been abandoned by her grandfather. She'd been the victim of a cover-up that had stolen her entire family history. And now I had to decide whether to tell her the truth about why her mother had really disappeared, or let her go on believing that Lionel had simply been a neglectful grandfather who'd chosen money over family. Either way, I was about to destroy what little peace Maya had managed to build from the ashes of her broken childhood. But she deserved to know. She deserved to understand that her mother hadn't abandoned her by choice, but had sacrificed everything to protect her from a man who would have destroyed her just as thoroughly as he'd destroyed Sarah. The question was, would the truth set Maya free, or would it destroy her completely? I carried Harold's envelope with me for 3 days, unable to decide whether to burden Maya with the full truth, or let her believe the simpler version of abandonment. Each shift at the diner became torture, watching her move through her routine with that careful distance she'd built between us, not knowing that I held the key to understanding her entire life story. The decision was taken out of my hands on Friday evening. Maya had been scheduled to close, but she'd called in sick again. Sandy was frustrated, and I found myself working a double shift to cover her tables. It was nearly midnight when I finally locked up and walked to my car, every muscle in my 68-year-old body screaming in protest. That's when I saw her, sitting on the hood of my old Honda Civic in the empty parking lot. Maya had been waiting for me. "We need to talk," she said simply. "Really, talk this time." I unlocked the car and we sat inside, the overhead light casting harsh shadows on both our faces. Maya looked like she hadn't slept in days. The necklace caught the light as she turned toward me. "I've been thinking about what you told me," she began, "about my mother and my grandfather, and there are things that don't add up." My heart started pounding. What kind of things? Grandma Rose used to have nightmares, bad ones. She would wake up crying and talking about someone named Sarah, begging her to forgive her for keeping secrets. Maya's voice was steady, but I could see her hands trembling. When I was little, I thought Sarah was someone she'd lost in the war or something. But Sarah was my mother's name, wasn't it? I nodded, unable to speak. And there's something else. Last year, when Grandma Rose was dying, she kept asking me to promise her something. She made me swear that if I ever found out I had living family, I would be careful. She said some people who share your blood can still be dangerous. The envelope felt like it weighed 100 pounds in my purse. "Maya, what aren't you telling me?" she interrupted. What was Grandma Rose protecting me from that was so terrible she'd rather let me grow up thinking I was alone. I looked at this brave young woman, who'd survived so much already, and realized she was stronger than I'd given her credit for. She wasn't asking for protection anymore. She was asking for the truth. "There's more," I said quietly, "about your grandfather, about why your mother really disappeared." I pulled out Harold's envelope and placed it on the console between us. This is going to be difficult to hear. For the next hour, sitting in that dark parking lot, I told Maya everything. About Margaret's death and how Lionel's choices may have contributed to it. About Sarah's fight for justice, and how her own father had her institutionalized to silence her. About the years of hiding and the fake death that had been the only way to keep Maya safe. Maya listened without interrupting, her face growing paler with each revelation. When I finished, she sat in silence for so long I began to worry she'd gone into shock. Finally, she spoke. "My mother is dead? Really dead this time?" "Yes, about 5 years ago. Harold said it was cancer, so I never had a chance to know her. Not because she abandoned me, but because she died protecting me from him." The pain in her voice was unbearable. "Maya, your mother loved you more than anything. Everything she did was to keep you safe. Safe from my own grandfather." Maya's voice was hollow. "Safe from your husband." The way she said it made me flinch, because that's what Lionel had been, my husband. The man I'd shared a bed with for over 40 years, never knowing he was capable of such cruelty. "I didn't know," I whispered. "I swear to you, Maya, I had no idea what kind of man he really was." Maya turned to look at me, and for the first time since I'd told her who she was, her expression softened slightly. "I believe you. You lost everything when he died, didn't you? The house, the money, everything." I nodded. "The lawyers said there were debts I didn't know about, bad investments. When it was all settled, there was nothing left." "Do you think he planned it that way? Do you think he knew you'd end up with nothing?" The question had haunted me for months, but I'd never wanted to examine it too closely. Now, faced with the evidence of Lionel's capacity for manipulation and control, I couldn't avoid the possibility. I don't know. Maybe. Maybe he thought if I was dependent on him, I'd never ask the wrong questions. Maya leaned back against the passenger seat, staring up at the car's ceiling. "So we're both his victims, in a way." "Yes, I think we are." She reached up and touched the necklace, the same gesture I'd seen her make hundreds of times, but now I understood what it meant. It wasn't just jewelry. It was the only connection she had to the grandmother she'd never known, the mother she'd lost, and the truth about who she really was. "This necklace," she said softly. "It's been leading me back to my family this whole time, even when I didn't know I was looking for them." "Your great-grandmother would have loved you," I said. "Margaret. She died so young, but from what Harold told me, she was kind and strong, just like you." "And my mother?" "She sounds like she was incredibly brave. She gave up everything to protect you." Maya was quiet for another long moment. Then she asked the question I'd been dreading. "What happens now? Do we just go back to working together like none of this happened? Do we pretend we're not family?" I'd been asking myself the same question. "I don't know. What do you want to happen?" She turned to face me fully. "I want to know more about them, about Margaret and Sarah. I want to see pictures, read letters, learn everything I can about the family I never got to know. I can help with that. Harold has some things, and there might be more in storage somewhere. And I want to know more about you." Her voice was tentative now. "You're the only family I have left, aren't you? The only person who remembers them." The simple acknowledgement brought tears to my eyes. "Yes, and you're the only family I have left too. Then maybe we can figure this out together. Maybe we can be family the right way this time." I reached over and squeezed her hand. "I'd like that very much." Maya squeezed back, then let go and opened the car door. "I need some time to process all of this. Everything you've told me. But I want you to know something." She paused, one foot already on the asphalt. "What?" "I'm glad Grandma Rose's plan worked. I'm glad the necklace led me to you. Even if the truth is terrible, at least now I know I'm not alone." She walked to her own car, leaving me sitting in the parking lot with tears streaming down my face. For the first time since Lionel's death, I felt something other than grief and regret. I felt hope. But as I drove home that night, I couldn't shake the feeling that we weren't finished uncovering the truth about Lionel's secrets. The payments to Rose Williams had continued right up until his death. What if there were other victims? Other family members who'd been silenced or bought off? What if Maya and I weren't the only ones who deserved to know the truth about what Lionel had done? The next morning, I called Harold again. "Harold, there's something else I need to know," I said when he answered. "Were there others? Other people Lionel paid to keep quiet?" The long pause told me everything I needed to know. "Harold? Lucille, I think you and Maya have been through enough. Some stones are better left unturned." That's not your decision to make. If there are other victims of what Lionel did, they deserve to know they're not alone. Another pause. There was someone else. A woman named Elena Martinez. She worked for Lionel's company in the early 90s. She tried to file a harassment complaint, but Lionel made it go away. My blood ran cold. How? The same way he dealt with Sarah. He had her credibility destroyed, made sure she couldn't find work anywhere in the industry. Then he offered her a settlement in exchange for her silence. Is she still alive? As far as I know. She moved to Oregon, changed her name. But Lucille, tracking her down, telling her what you've learned, it might not be the kindness you think it is. I thought about Maya, sitting in my car last night, finally understanding why her life had been shaped by secrets and separation. I thought about the relief in her voice when she realized she wasn't alone. Everyone deserves the truth, Harold. Everyone deserves to know they weren't the only one. After I hung up, I sat in my tiny apartment and made a decision that would change both Maya's life and mine forever. We weren't just going to uncover our own family's truth. We were going to make sure Lionel could never hurt anyone else, even from the grave. And maybe, in the process, we'd finally build the family that Lionel's lies had destroyed. 6 months later, I stood in Maya's small apartment, watching her arrange flowers in a vase that had belonged to her great-grandmother Margaret. We'd found it in a storage unit that Harold had helped us locate, along with photo albums, letters, and other pieces of our family's history that Lionel had kept hidden away like guilty secrets. Maya had moved closer to me after we'd found Elena Martinez and helped her understand that she hadn't been alone in what Lionel had put her through. Elena was in her 50s now, a successful therapist who specialized in helping women recover from workplace trauma. When we contacted her, she cried for an hour on the phone, not from pain, but from relief that someone finally believed her story. The white roses were Margaret's favorite, I told Maya as she adjusted the stems. Sarah wrote about that in one of her letters to Rose. Maya smiled, the same radiant expression I'd seen that first day at the diner, but now it reached her eyes. I like knowing these little things about them. It makes them feel real. We'd been collecting these details for months, piecing together the lives of the women we'd both lost. Margaret's love of gardening and classical music, Sarah's fierce intelligence and her talent for painting, Rose's quiet strength and her terrible burden of keeping secrets to protect the child she'd loved as her own. "Are you nervous about today?" I asked. Maya touched the necklace at her throat, a gesture that had become less unconscious and more purposeful. A little, but mostly I'm excited. Today was the day we were finally visiting Sarah's grave. It had taken months to track down where she was buried, in a small cemetery in Oregon under the name Rose had chosen for her new identity. Maya had wanted to wait until she felt ready to say goodbye properly, and I'd respected that timeline. We'd both changed in these past months. Maya had enrolled in community college, studying business management with plans to eventually open her own restaurant. She'd discovered she had Sarah's entrepreneurial spirit and Margaret's practical sense, a combination that served her well. I'd helped her with tuition, using the small settlement I'd finally received from one of Lionel's hidden accounts. As for me, I'd found purpose in a way I never expected. Maya and I had started meeting with other women who'd been victimized by powerful men, sharing our story and helping them understand they weren't alone. Not in any formal capacity, just quiet conversations over coffee, letting them know that silence wasn't their only option. "Lucille?" Maya's voice brought me back to the present. "Are you ready?" I nodded, picking up the second bouquet we'd prepared. Yellow roses for Sarah, because Maya had remembered Rose mentioning that yellow had been her daughter's favorite color. The drive to the cemetery was peaceful. We'd made this trip together twice before, but this time felt different. Final, in a way. We weren't coming as strangers trying to understand their connection to a dead woman. We were coming as family, as the daughters and granddaughters Sarah had never gotten to know but had always loved. Sarah's headstone was simple, marked with the false name she'd lived under and dates that told only part of her story. Maya knelt down and placed her roses against the granite, then touched the carved letters of the name her mother had never really owned. Hi, Mom, she said softly. I brought someone to meet you. I placed my own flowers beside Maya's and knelt next to her, my old knees protesting but my heart full. Hello, Sarah. I'm sorry it took so long for us to find each other. Maya was quiet for a long time, her hand resting on the headstone. Finally, she spoke again. I understand now why you did what you did, why you gave me to Grandma Rose, why you let me think you were dead. You saved me from him. Tears were streaming down her face, but they weren't tears of grief anymore. They were tears of gratitude, of understanding, of love finally acknowledged. I wish I could have known you, she continued. I wish you could have seen me grow up, but I want you to know that Rose did exactly what you asked her to do. She protected me. She loved me. And she made sure I knew I came from love, even when she couldn't tell me the whole truth. I reached over and took Maya's free hand, squeezing gently. She squeezed back, and I felt the strength that had carried her through so much uncertainty and pain. And I want you to know that I'm not alone anymore, Maya said to the headstone. Lucille is teaching me about our family, about Margaret, and about you. She's helping me understand where I come from, and she's showing me that not everyone with our blood is dangerous. She turned to look at me then, and I saw Margaret's gentle eyes, and Sarah's determination, and something entirely new that belonged only to Maya. She's been the grandmother I never thought I'd have. The words hit me like a physical force, knocking the breath from my lungs. In all our months of rebuilding and discovery, Maya had never defined our relationship so clearly. I'd been afraid to hope for that level of connection, afraid to presume I could fill the void left by Rose's death. Maya, I whispered, my voice thick with emotion. It's true, she said simply. You've given me back my history, my identity, my family. You've shown me that love doesn't have to come with conditions or secrets. That's what grandmothers are supposed to do. I pulled her into my arms, both of us crying now, but they were healing tears, the kind that wash away old pain and make room for new growth. When we finally separated, Maya reached into her purse and pulled out an envelope I'd never seen before. I have something for you, she said. I've been waiting for the right moment. Inside the envelope was a single photograph, clearly taken recently. It showed Maya and me at the diner, laughing over something during our break. I didn't remember the moment being captured, but looking at it now, I could see what we'd become. Family, chosen and cherished, rather than obligated and manipulated. Elena took this last month when she came to visit, Maya explained. She said she wanted to document what healing looks like. I had copies made. She handed me the photograph, and I held it carefully, amazed by what I saw. Two women, separated by decades and connected by tragedy, who'd somehow found their way to joy. There's something written on the back, Maya said. I turned the photo over and read Maya's careful handwriting. Lucille and Maya Bennett, 2024. Sometimes the family you choose is stronger than the family you're born into. Bennett. She'd taken my last name, the name I'd carried through my marriage to Lionel, but which had originally belonged to my own family, the people who'd loved me without conditions or secrets. Maya, you don't have to. I want to, she said firmly. Williams was never really my name anyway. It was just another one of the disguises we had to wear to stay safe. Bennett feels like home. We spent another hour at the cemetery, sharing stories and memories and plans for the future. When we finally left, I felt like we were taking Sarah with us, not as a burden of grief, but as a blessing of understanding. That evening, we had dinner at Maya's apartment, a tradition we'd started months ago. She was becoming an excellent cook, combining techniques she remembered Rose teaching her with recipes I'd learned from my own mother decades ago. We were creating new traditions, building on the foundation of love that had somehow survived Lionel's attempts to destroy it. As we cleaned up the dishes, Maya said something that surprised me. I forgive him, Lionel. I almost dropped the plate I was drying. Maya, you don't have to. I'm not doing it for him, she interrupted. I'm doing it for me, for us. I won't let his choices poison what we've built. She hung up the dish towel and turned to face me. He was afraid, I think. Afraid of what would happen if people knew the truth about him. So he chose control instead of love. secrets instead of honesty, and in the end, he lost everything anyway. See, I thought about Lionel, dying alone in a hospital room while I sat by his bedside, never knowing that somewhere across the country, his granddaughter was working a night shift and wearing his first wife's necklace. He'd spent so much energy hiding from his past that he'd missed the chance to be part of our future. You're wiser than I am, I told Maya. I'm still working on forgiveness. That's okay, she said, hugging me tightly. We have time. As I drove home that night, I thought about the strange journey that had brought us together. A necklace passed down through generations of women who'd never gotten to know each other. A chance encounter in a diner between two people who'd been family without knowing it. The courage to seek truth even when it was painful. Maya was right. We had time. Time to build the family that should have existed all along. Time to honor the women who'd come before us by living with the honesty they'd been denied. Time to prove that love, real love, was stronger than fear. I pulled into the parking lot of my small apartment complex and sat for a moment, looking up at the stars. Somewhere among them, I imagined Margaret and Sarah and Rose were watching, finally at peace, knowing that their sacrifices hadn't been in vain. The necklace had found its way home, and so had we. Now I'm curious about you who listened to my story. What would you do if you were in my place? Have you ever been through something similar? Comment below, and meanwhile, I'm leaving on the final screen 2 other stories that are channel favorites, and they will definitely surprise you. Thank you for watching until here.